Referencing a 22-year-old movie is how I draw in new viewers, right? Hello folks, Phil Gallagher, aka ThrabenU here for another Legacy video, and today I'm going to be playing kind of a mono black scam / mono black aggro deck list. But in the deck tech here, I'm going to briefly introduce this deck, and then I'm going to get into the weeds. Like, I'm going to go fucking wild when it comes to talking about tuning a mono black deck list. So I'm going to give you like the 2-minute deck tech version, and then I'm going to give you your chance to leave if you don't want to see me just really going deep into card choices. So mono black was up next in the recording queue. Simone, your deck is technically up next. I'll get to you soon, but Saw in Half was out of stock. And so I jumped ahead in the queue a little bit, and I'm going to play MC's list today, who wanted to see this mono black scam deck that we see here. So I'm going to talk about this deck, and then we'll go real deep. So generally speaking, what this deck is seeking to do is reanimate something such as a Troll of Khazad-dum or a Grief. And backing this up, we are going to have other aggressive threats such as Exsanguinator Cavalry and some things like Sheoldred that give you reach. This is not going as deep as you possibly can down the Troll package, but it is going and playing a Malakir Rebirth, which isn't super common by Legacy standards. An ETB tap land is really bad, but this does do cute things with Grief. It can be pitched to Grief. It can bring Grief back. Like, there is some appeal here. And the sideboard features something that I think is kind of cool, which is Drown in Sorrow, as a way to just kind of wipe out all of the creatures you might see out of a go-wide deck, such as Goblins, which is seeing a lot of play right now, and some of the other fast removal, such as Dismember and Snuff Out, is sort of a hedge against those styles of deck. But the cuts have to come somewhere, right? Like, this deck doesn't max out on Trolls. This one's not maxing out on Sheoldreds. Like, there's choices to be made that are meaningful when it comes to a mono black deck list. And I'm gonna make myself big for a minute here. The honest answer is that a lot of times the general shell is so consistently strong that the decisions that you make, while meaningful, often end up getting you to a similar overall win percentage and result, making this archetype a little tough to tune. So, MC wanted me to really deep dive, well, what are the impacts of your choices? And that's what I'm going to do now. So if you're here for gameplay, jump to round 1, because I'm probably going to spend 5 minutes or so just going ham here. So the first thing they wanted me to talk about was the mana base. So within the confines of Legacy, these mono black decks tend to pick up some number of Urza's Saga, Ancient Tomb, and Wasteland. Well, how do you know which fucking one you're supposed to play? How do you know if you're supposed to play multiples? Let's start with Urza's Saga. At its fundamental level, Urza's Saga does 2 things in this mono black deck. It gives you additional bodies that are just a part of your mana base and don't require a real slot. And so this is going to make you better versus control decks, and it gives you a small tutor package. Giving you access to something like Shadow Spear can help recoup some of the life loss that you take from cards like Thoughtseize, Reanimate, Snuff Out, Dismember, and so forth. If you are playing Ancient Tomb in your deck, Ancient Tomb exists to power out cards that look like this with 2 colorless pips and 1 black pip, and cards like Sheoldred. However, every time you play a colorless land like Urza's Saga and Ancient Tomb, it makes the black cards harder to cast, which is most noticeable with Dauthi Voidwalker. So Dauthi Voidwalker takes something cool from your opponent, Dauthi it, reanimate Dauthi, becomes much less reliable. as does just using Dalthy Voidwalker as a turn 2 piece of graveyard interaction. So you'll notice that like this specific build isn't on Leyline of the Void, for example. And that means that the mana base probably needs to be a little bit more conservative because Dalthy Voidwalker is going to be one of your primary ways of actually going and hating on the graveyard. And then there's our good friend Wasteland. Wasteland does all the Wasteland things that it does, but conceptually for a mono black deck, the biggest reason to be running Wasteland is actually opposing Urza's Saga. So if you kind of look at the removal in this deck list, there's just not a lot of it, right? And the removal that's there is sometimes situational, maybe missing larger Urza's Construct tokens if they don't start out as 1/1s, or maybe like later on in the game, paying 4 life to remove a construct becomes a little bit dicey, or, you know, spending a turn paying the full 4 mana. So Wasteland, you know, can sometimes just do cool tempo things, but a lot of times this exists because you have an Urza's Saga problem. And a lot of times versus artifact decks, you're packing Null Rods and Pithing Needles to answer those problems, but then your opponent goes Urza's Saga Ancient Tomb, and you're like, oh well, shit, I'm just going to lose to that, even though I shut off the rest of my opponent's deck. And then these things work together, these lands work together in sort of weird ways. So if you play Wasteland and another colorless land, there starts to be a real strain on your mana base. But if you play Ancient Tomb alongside Urza's Saga, that actually makes your Urza's Saga better than it would be if it's in a deck that looks like this, with just like 4 Wastelands supplementing like a Grief Dalthy Voidwalker tempo plan. Now, the next level beyond that is actually getting into some of the spells. When do you want to play Chrome Mox, for example? So this deck is on Dark Ritual, and it makes sense. Dark Ritual sets up like Thoughtseize into Dalthy Voidwalker, Thoughtseize into Bowmasters, sets up these as turn 1 plays, turns Sheoldred into a turn 2 play. Well, how do you know if you want Chrome Mox 2? There's kind of 2 primary times. Number 1 is you're going all in very quickly, and number 2 is that you have a source of card advantage. So conceptually speaking, right now in this build, 25 of these things are true mana sources, with Troll kind of being a mana source. Imagine if you put 4 Chrome Mox into this deck on top of that, now you're at like 31 mana sources. If you don't have something like the One Ring, you know, a Phyrexian Arena style card, if you don't have something that is giving you extra gas, you need to like end the game very quickly, or the number of 2-for-1s you do to yourself with cards like Chrome Mox and Grief just ends up becoming so very, very, very noticeable. So you need some sort of like Monarch, Initiative, One Ring style card that gives you a bunch of card advantage, or the Chrome Mox ends up being kind of sus. If you are more all in on like, say, Beseech the Mirror or Leyline Helm combo, and you will just end the game once you get to 4 mana, like, sure, it will be much stronger there than in a deck that is planning on using the attack step repeatedly. The next thing I want to talk about is some of the flex slot removal. Primarily Snuff Out versus Dismember versus Edicts. Sudden Edict used to be the edict of choice in Legacy. Like, it was just not strictly better than Sheoldred's Edict, but largely better. The uncounterability versus Delver decks was just so massive. And then Orcish Bowmasters became 40-ish% of the format. And so a traditional Edict became noticeably worse. So Sheoldred's Edict tends to be the first removal spell that these decks play, and Dismember and Snuff Out tend to come afterwards. Snuff Out is absolutely the best card that you can play versus these Namesticker Goblin decks, because you can just tap out for something like Opposition Agent on your turn while still having removal up. And then Dismember is kind of the second best option on that front. The thing that Dismember does really well is just efficiently answer initiative creatures. And one of the differences between Snuff Out and Dismember is that Dismember is flexible in how much life it costs you in a way that Snuff Out isn't. Dismember can be 1 mana, 4 life. it can be 2 mana, 2 life. Whereas Snuff Out is that like 4 mana or 4 life. And there's not this middle of the road option. And Dismember tends to be really nice in that regard. But each one of these has other weaknesses. So for example, a Dismember doesn't always kill a larger Murktide Regent. And black threats are common in Legacy right now. You know, Orcish Bowmasters, all over the place. Grief, all over the place. And this is occasionally going to miss hybrid creatures such as Fiend Artisan as well. So these are some of the things that I'm thinking about as I tune these mono black decks. I know a lot of times it's very easy to just think like Dark Ritual goes burr. There's not a lot of thought going into it, but in reality, if you compare a whole bunch of mono black lists across like, let's say like the last 3 months or so, you're going to notice that there's not a lot of consensus on what exactly the flex slots and mana base should look like, because it is really complicated. And there's some other niche stuff that I didn't talk about. So for example, you can play Urza Saga, and when that enters play, there's a trigger. And unless you have an Urborg, you don't make mana while that trigger is on the stack. So if you play Urza Saga, you will sometimes open yourself up to being knocked off of a spell on curve. And in the case of like an Orcish Bowmasters or an opposition agent, like that can be just a game-ending problem. Whew. Okay. That was a long-ass deck tech. I hope that was really useful for some of you out there. And if you find you need to buy some cards, check out Cool Stuff Inc. and use promo code ThrabenU to save 5% on your next order. Let's battle. All right, I'm keeping a middle-of-the-road opening hand here. The plan is kind of Douthie Voidwalker on turn 2, or Orcish Bowmasters if it seems like that's going to be better, followed by some combination of Wastelanding for tempo, and then following up with Sheoldred. This is a very fair hand, unless we draw something like a Grief. I think I'm just going to go ahead and slam the Voidwalker. If it gets countered or otherwise answered, this allows me to reanimate it next turn while going and also dropping Bowmasters. That's a little frustrating. So that's an Atraxa. My opponent will presumably get to put that in play before I get to reanimate it. My reanimate. Oh no, it's broken. Well, my opponent's thinking about it way more than I thought they would. Maybe that's a good sign for me. Alright, yeah, I lost the reanimate. My opponent reanimates their Atraxa. I'm sad. Oh man, and I'm gonna get griefed. So I'm just skimming my list here. I've got 2 Sheoldred's Edicts that can answer that. Snuff Out doesn't answer this, it's black. Animate Dead, Thoughtseize, Grief, Dark Ritual. No Exhume. The Grief is gone. I hate how poor this is on Magic Online. Alright, so nope, come back. Animate Dead, Thoughtseize, Dark Ritual. Okay, well, those are gone. So I have access to some fun things here. Just don't really out-damage this Atraxa. Don't get to Death Touch it. I'm going to play this as a land. I think I'm going to Thoughtseize. Currently doesn't really adjust my clock. I will take this Animate Dead, I suppose. It can take my Boatmasters. Well, yeah, I mean, it can. Yeah, I think that's the plan. We'll bash in with Douthie Voidwalker, but we usually end up being a little bit too slow. Sheoldred's life gain doesn't really help me out. This like just barely lined up poorly for us. Goodbye, Sheoldred. I guess the good news is that... Never mind. Reanimate's such a good rip. Yeah. So... At this point, I am effectively dead. That's fine. Don't have ley lines here. I have some surgicals. These are edicts for creatures that slip into play. I'm not like the most excited about playing these. Bowmasters is kind of mid, except when my opponent Grizzlebrands, and then it's insane. Snuff Out just goes for surgicals like that. That is the easiest decision here, and then it's like, do I want to do this? The Liliana Plus mode is just like really awkward. So it may be that I'm trying to stop something from getting into play rather than answering it once it's there. Which I don't love. I think I'm usually going to win the game on the play and lose the game on the draw. So this is awkward, right? Like I have the Dauthi Voidwalker. I have a Grief to try to get myself to turn 2. But if I grief my opponent and put grief into my graveyard, my opponent can grief me with their reanimation spells, and then all of a sudden I don't have Dauthi Voidwalker anymore, and in fact I have nothing. So I'm going to say that this one is not a keep. Like I think it looks like it is on the surface, but I think it usually doesn't work. This one is much stronger. I'm going to keep this pitching Exsanguinator Cavalry. And we've got Surgical to try to make it through turn 1, and then 2 Dauthi Voidwalkers for turn 2. And hopefully that's enough. Sometimes it isn't. Staring at each other? I'm good to stare at each other. Because a good thing often happens. So a lot of times, I will go and cast this Dauthi Voidwalker, and my opponent will entomb in response, just like before. But then I'll just have Surgical available. It's a troll. Yeah, that's fine. I'm not going to fire off Surgical on troll immediately. I'll do it if my opponent puts something on the stack, such as a discard spell targeting me. But otherwise, I'd rather wait for them to like put a Reanimate on the stack and get my 2 for 1. Dark Ritual. This is 4 mana. We could just see like a Sheoldred being flooped into play. Something weird is going on over there. Like, my opponent's in the tank, and I don't know why. It is a murderous cut after a lot of thought. Yeah, you got it. What's that? A second Dauthi Voidwalker in the shadow of the first. And I think I play my Dauthi followed by my Thoughtseize here. Because this gives me the possibility to put a fatty under Dauthi and then just cast it. Alright, my opponent went into the tank again and played Entomb. There's an Atraxa in yard. I Thoughtseize you. What has void counters? Dark Ritual. I'm going to take their Archon of Cruelty, I think. Alright, so that leaves my opponent with that stuff. I guess not the Swamp. So now I have an Archon of Cruelty under Dauthi Voidwalker. I have a Surgical for if my opponent tries to Animate Dead the Atraxa. And I feel like that was pretty well telegraphed. My opponent may be in a situation where they just have to go for it anyway. Yep, but that's fine. So I like the Conceptual Liliana's even less if my opponent is boarding into Bowmasters. I have Bowmasters for opposing Bowmasters. I have a couple of Edicts already. I could do something like this. I think I take too much collateral damage if I do, though. Okay, I think turn 2 Dauthi Voidwalker is just objectively too slow on the play. We're going to ship this. This is marginally better. You know, this is a 1, 2, 3 curve. I toss back the Sheoldred. This is not the Surgical Extraction hand that I want, but I only have 2 of those in the deck. I don't think I'm mulliganing towards those when my opponent might just keep a Thoughtseize hand. Alright, we're going places. That's a Grief. So at this point, I'm F6, hands off the wheel. Alright, I lose Dauthi. Oh, probably lose my Thoughtseize. Is it Entomb Reanimate? That's insane. Yeah, that's fine. How good are my opponent's 10? This just also produces an Archon next turn. I think I have nothing that realistically beats that. I'm going to go ahead and concede here. GG's. Today's video is sponsored by Moxfield.com, which is an absolutely awesome place to keep all of your deck lists. I keep all of my personal deck lists there as well, in addition to all of the stuff that I do for the stream. And in the future, they're going to have a social media site on here too. So if you're worried about other certain websites dying, maybe join Moxfield, put your deck lists up there, and in the future, you'll be there for social media stuff too. Okay, this one's a little weird. I'm fine keeping it. It is extremely variable in what this hand does and how good it is, because I might just be reanimating a giant creature. Ah. So my opponent does not have the giant creature in hand, but I get to take their Entomb, kind of leaving them with nothing. Alright. I'm going to kind of awkwardly lose my Reanimate to their Thoughtseize, and I'm going to be one Faithless Looting / Entomb effect away from death pretty much the entire game, which is not very cash money of my opponent. I mean, at least we're on the play, right? Like, the games where I'm on the draw in this matchup are rough. Yep. So we're just going to see fetch Thoughtseize. Presumably off Badlands? No, going for the basic. Sure. Now, if my opponent wants to hemorrhage their resources, they could Lotus Petal, Dark Ritual, Animate Dead, Bowmasters, ping my Bowmasters, but I don't think that leaves them in a position to actually win the game. I think that's just like playing to not lose. Then I just like reanimate my Bowmasters, kill their Bowmasters, and I'm like so far ahead. They're doing it though. I don't think this is a good idea. I'll shut up if your last card is Thoughtseize and you just Thoughtseize me again, but otherwise this seems poor. Oh, reanimate my Bowmasters. Bowmasters, your Bowmasters, that is my Bowmasters. And see, now I have a 2/2 that gets to attack into your 1/1, and you no longer have a Dark Ritual or an Animate Dead. So, like, sure, my Bowmasters and my Reanimate have been used, but I don't know that the net result here is good for my opponent. Like, they also fetched this Badlands and then used Lotus Petal, so now they're off red too. Not a fan of this line. Yeah, sure, like, you can keep doing this, or you could do something that busts the game wide open by waiting a little while. Okay, so my opponent's not even attacking. Yeah, so now my opponent never has the ability to get a fatty into play unless their last card is Entomb. I'm also the beatdown because I get the first attack step and I have an unblockable creature. So I'm just good making this attack, whereas you weren't. Yep. I think we were handed a gift here. Note that if I draw another land, I also get to potentially knock my opponent off of red mana for Faithless Looting. This is a missed point of damage. This has Shadow and cannot block. Send it. And now my opponent's on a 3-turn clock. They're missing points of damage. They're kind of trading resources poorly. Yeah, sure. You can Bowmasters the Bowmasters. I'm not drawing cards, and this does not put you in a superior clock situation. Like, I get that you might not have another play here. I don't know what. Yeah, there's 2 points of damage missed total. That has text. I don't think I fire that off immediately though. Like, I probably just use it to kill the token, but I wait to see if my opponent like somehow does a pre-combat Bowmasters of their own or something. Unmask, target me. This is my best card. I guess I'll cast it. Sack a creature token, if you would. We're just going to leave these in play so my opponent can't reanimate them. My opponent may end up, like, taking my Sheoldred, and that's not the best for me. But they've already used multiple, like, Animate Dead style cards with single targets. Cumulatively 4 points of missed damage off Bowmasters. Okay. I don't care about these. My opponent's dead in 1 attack. Cool. Scoreboard says we win. I think that game should have been significantly harder. What I do last time, surgicals in, snuff outs out, and then I think I considered some other removal and didn't do it. If my opponent is going to hyper-aggressively reanimate something like Bowmasters using their resource, maybe I should play a couple more spot removal spells. Like pull some of my top end, like pull 2 Sheoldreds for 2 Dismembers. I think I'm going to do that versus this opponent, given how they played that last game. I don't think I like this hand. I have some removal, but I really want a turn 0 or turn 1 piece of interaction in this matchup. I don't think I get to fish for turn 0 interaction having only 2 surgicals. This one I could grief on my turn 1, but I have no real plan to win. I'm going to go to 5 here. This 5-card hand doesn't do anything. I'll go to 4. This 4-card hand can play a Dalthy Voidwalker on turn 1. That is the best thing that I have been offered thus far. I probably just keep this and throw back the remainder of these. And I hope this is good enough. Chancellor of the Annex, absolutely fuck me. That keeps me off of turn 1 Dalthy. That's frustrating. I can still turn 2 Dalthy. Just Dark Ritual off a swamp, pay with the other one, Dalthy. Nope. No good things for Phil. Well, let's see how bad it is from here. Basic land, not the best. Alright, we dodged just turn 1 Entomb, so that's nice. Why did my opponent keep their hand? Why did my opponent keep their hand? Reanimate target Dalthy Voidwalker, pay the 1 for Chancellor. Bury? Sure. I will not pay, as my target is gone. But, like, why did my opponent keep their hand? Like, they're on the play. They have the ability to absolutely roll me over when they are on the play. And they just didn't. Not even when they get to 2 mana? Tilt? That's not the best. I'm going to wait and see if my opponent fetches, because I'm currently representing an opposition agent. I will drop that to take them off of Scrubland. Taking them off red is more important, but my opponent may have some absolute monstrosity of a hand that just, like, I don't know, has a bunch of Sheoldreds or something in it. And keeping them from casting those may be important. I have zero ability to read my opponent's hand right now. Like, I cannot rationalize their keep. Like, I'm on a mold of 4. I should very clearly be dead. I have said this plenty of times, but the London Mulligan is the most powerful thing that exists in Magic the Gathering. Like, use your mulligan. I am flooding out like mad, so I can't punish this right now. But my opponent has no business keeping whatever they kept here. Like, this is turn 6. My opponent is a turn 1 combo deck. What are we doing? Sure. Are you passing the turn again? Looting's fine. I only care about looting if my opponent puts 2 creatures into the graveyard at the same time and then casts Exhume. I don't care if they cast a Reanimate specifically. Alright, so that's 2 creatures. That's a Chancellor and a Sarah's Emissary. I don't know if that's supposed to be in the deck. Okay, my opponent reanimates, so I'll Surgical. I have plenty of mana to just pay there. Yeah, my opponent's hand was not a keep. Okay, what do I need to worry about here? Coffin Purge. So 2 fairies, a Coffin Purge. My opponent unfortunately gets to go Petal, Animate Dead here and put a Chancellor into play, but I'm not entirely sure that that's a problem. Okay. Also, is the Chancellor or the Sarah's Emissary better? Because the tax on this seems much worse to me. than getting protection from a creature type. So I think my opponent sequenced their spells wrong. Like, I think you target the Chancellor first and then actually resolve the Sarah's Emissary. The Sarah's Emissary is so much of a faster clock with an Animate Dead on it. Like, I have so much time to draw out of this. And I may even just race it with fair creatures. Tax doesn't matter. And we're chilling. Love just seeing more land drops from my opponent rather than relevant spells. Like, I'm taking 4 a turn, my opponent is taking 3 a turn. And I probably have a higher density of castable cards in my deck than my opponent does right now. No cards with void counters on it yet. So what's sick here is, assuming my opponent remembers, they should flashback a Faithless Looting, and then I am going to get them with an Orcish Bowmasters, and I will be very far ahead at that stage. 4 damage is no big deal. It's going to be a 3-mana Bowmasters, and all of a sudden, I have the better clock, just kind of objectively speaking. Swamp I don't want to see, but here it is. Send in for 5. Opponent's at 9. Now they can pump the brakes on their Chancellor attack to hold back some of this damage, but then I still have them on a 3-turn clock for Dauthi Voidwalker. My opponent has a castable spell that they've clicked on and then unclicked on it. Okay, they are pumping the brakes. Surgical Extraction is a card. I am not unhappy to draw it. It's not exactly what I'm looking for right now. I would not say I'm unhappy about it. That is a grief. I don't care about that. I will let my opponent take the surgical, I think. I'm going to think about it for a second. They attack, I am at 8. I attack them to 3, they attack me for 7, I attack them for dead. Bowmasters in play. Faithless Looting would put them to 1. Fetch land's not valid. Reanimate is no longer on the table. I could just take their Faithless Looting right here and not give them the opportunity to just looting into the absolute nuts next turn. I think I'll do that. Feels weird, but the other stuff's not really live, so why not? This also just clues me into what's in my opponent's hand, or if there's something weird happening. Oh, they have Coffin Purge. Got it. So you can now grief me. This is fine. I'll lose a writ. I don't get attacked for 4. My opponent's not pressuring my life total enough. Delta's whatever. Attack my opponent for 3. So they're at 3. And they're now presumably dead. Scoreboard says we win. But, like, if we go back to the turn where my opponent double reanimated, if my opponent just has a 6-power creature in play instead of a 4-power creature, I probably don't win that one. If my opponent has protection from a creature type, such as, or has protection from a card type, such as creature, I have a hard time winning this one. I was on a mulligan to 4. I have no business being in that game. My opponent should have, abused the London mulligan, and after they didn't, they should have worked towards victory, and they just weren't. If my opponent continues to attack me with this Chancellor, like, maybe they can find a way to string together an aggro win somehow, but here we are. I've got a weird one. And how good this hand is just fully how good is Orcish Bowmasters in the specific matchup that I am given. This is a low agency hand. The upside's pretty high. I'm going to keep it. And I think the plan is turn 2 Bowmasters, turn 3 Bowmasters while holding up Rebirth. And we just hope this lines up well. If I get to Wasteland that City of Traders before my opponent makes a meaningful play, everything's okay. Like, if my opponent just plays Chalice on 1, I'm fucking ecstatic. Nice. Yeah, super happy about this. So I am just going to go ahead and knock my opponent off of that city. And we'll hope they have a follow-up. Well, I won't. They are hoping to have a follow-up soul land here to play a meaningful follow-up. If they don't, they are just immediately massively behind. Yeah, that's not a soul land. Human. This probably means we are playing against a red-white initiative deck. That Chrome Mox is very good, though. That will allow my opponent to make a meaningful play this turn. Archon goes under there. 3 mana for a Fable. I mean, I've got Bowboy. This is not the end of the world. It at least makes it more awkward for my opponent. So I can use Bowmaster to effectively blank the discard portion of this. Now my opponent can use it. Comes at a pretty big cost to do it twice. Doing it once is not the end of the world, but it means that the Orc can just trade with the Goblin Shaman. Okay, so my opponent discards a Solitude. I'm just going to ping their face. And then we'll see where this goes from here. I'll trade these happily. So if I ping this token, I can trade the Bowmasters for it and be left with a 2-power creature in play, but my opponent doesn't have to attack, and sometimes I'm wasting damage. Oh, man, that's so close to good. So very close to good. So I'll just attack for 1, and we'll see if my opponent blocks. They don't. My opponent goes to 17. I'm going to play this as the tapped land. I will re-Bowmasters. And my opponent kind of ends up in the same situation that they were in last turn, where it's very awkward to loot through their stuff, and they don't do it. Reflection of Kiki-Jiki is really good still. It just, like, creates something that I can't just... Let me rephrase that. It creates something that they can send into combat without losing a true resource. Oh shit, do you have an initiative creature? You do. That's very bad for me if I can't take that out of play, because my opponent gets to just copy it. So, like, my Sheoldred is cool and all, but not cooler than 2 Seasoned Dungeoneers per turn. I have a couple targeted removal spells, right? No. No, I have Snuff Out. Okay. Wasteland. Not right now. I mean, I'm going to play that, but I don't get to Wasteland my opponent's stuff. Unfortunately, Sheoldred doesn't get to block this. My opponent pretty easily should take over the game from here. It's just Forge up Seasoned Dungeoneer, copy Seasoned Dungeoneer, attack for a gajillion. My opponent can make a second Reflection of Kiki-Jiki next turn. Or alternatively, copy the Reflection of Kiki-Jiki at my end step repeatedly, and then make a whole bunch of Seasoned Dungeoneers the following turn, if they want to be cheeky about it. This is the world is their oyster situation. I'm at 15, taking 8-ish in combat. I don't think I can recover. Maybe if I draw specifically Snuff Out to kill Seasoned Dungeoneer, I can maybe stabilize, but 2 sets of these are brutal. Now, I'm at 6. Oh, but wait, there's more. Archon's good. Why are you playing a city? Yeah, that seems unnecessary. Sure. Dead. Just dead to this, copy it. That's unfortunate. So I have a pro-white creature that I can board in. I have some amount of additional removal spells that I can consider. What's my worst stuff here? Thoughtseize, take my opponent's initiative creature, reanimate it is a very real plan. So I'm not going to cut the Thoughtseizes and the Griefs. I think I'm going to cut the Orcish Bowmasters for removal. Opposition Agent is not exactly the bee's knees either. I could play Lily over that. Lily works well with Turok. Okay. Drown in Sorrow, like, specifically would have been good that game versus, you know, multiple Fable of the Mirror Breakers, but otherwise is not too exciting. This is a snap keep. This hand is insane. So, how I play it is kind of tough. I think it's Grief Pitch Troll. Attempt to take my opponent's initiative creature. Take a second thing if I need to with Thoughtseize. Otherwise, reanimate Grief or reanimate an initiative creature with a removal spell backup. Alright, my opponent kept on 6. Grief Pitch Troll. Why the fuck did my opponent keep that hand? What is the wording of this? Under its owner's control. Yeah, so I'll just take their Touch the Spirit Realm, reanimate the Grief, take their Fury. Like, my opponent's hand has 0 plan to win. Like, all it has is mana. Sure. Sheoldred. It is unclear to me whether casting Thoughtseize is better than holding up Sheoldred's Edict. I am going to cast the Thoughtseize, though. Yeah, you can take that. Sure. Like, that's fine. I keep my opponent off of 4 mana for another turn cycle, which is a pretty big deal. And my opponent does not top deck a live card. I'm kind of playing Delver right now, where I just have the ability to remove the next 2 threats that my opponent plays while dealing 3 damage a turn to my opponent. And, like, Dark Ritual can get me to Sheoldred or something. I'm most worried about something like Solitude that just, like, takes out my Grief. I'm actively happy if my opponent plays an initiative creature. Like, it's so good for me if they do. Yes. You may do your search. And then I think I Sheoldred's Edict this away. It's my more mana-intensive card. Please sacrifice a non-token creature. So this is kind of a big deal, in that this allows me to also make land drop 4 for the Sheoldred that's been stuck in my hand. And just a little thing here, because of Archon, I actually want to Delta this turn rather than play the swamp that I just showed my opponent. Alright, so have you drawn another good thing? Caves of Chaos Adventure. That's pretty good. You want to Forger Lostwell. It should be Lostwell. Alright, they figured that out. Now I get to just dismember this without paying any life. Take the initiative back. Alright, land drop. Send it. Opponent goes to 8. I'll take the initiative. I'm going to forge up my Grief. I don't want to forge up the Sheoldred. The reason being is that I want differentiated threats. That way I'm not just soft to a Solitude. So this way I have 2 different things that can attack through a Solitude that my opponent plays. That was like very clearly a mulligan on my opponent's end. I am not going to change anything about how I have boarded. So my opponent's on 7. I'm not great versus Chalice with this hand. I'm good against a lot of other stuff. I can just, like, Thoughtseize them, take a Fury or Solitude or Initiative creature and reanimate it, and the ability to reanimate again is solid. I think I'm going to keep this, hoping to dodge Chalice specifically. Like, I played around it very well early on in game 1. My opponent might have the read that it's not super effective against my deck. Okay, cool. So this is going to be my opponent going very deep on one specific card. We're hoping it's something like Fable. 4th Aerlingas. I mean, that's pretty good. My opponent becomes the Monarch, and my whole like Thoughtseize Reanimate thing is now awkward. I'm still doing it? Like, there's 2 cards over there. And let's hope one of them is a creature. I can spin this game. Nice. If something like this happens, my opponent will get to draw another card off Monarch, but then I can hopefully stabilize the board. Some bad things can still happen. 4th Aerlingas is very good. But if I just like take 2 and my opponent draws another card, like they're just offsetting things like Chrome Mox that happened. Ah, fuck, an initiative creature too? Alright. That was the worst case scenario. We'll see what I can do. The thing that has to happen is this. I Solitude this, but then Forge makes it so that I don't cleanly trade. I don't think I can Wasteland my opponent anymore. I think this needs to be mana that taps for an opposition agent. And at some point, I'll block with the Solitude and hope... Oh, wow, they're not going for it. I'm at 9. You don't need card selection if you just kill me. Like, you're drawing an extra card per turn with Monarch, and you have the initiative. You have so much card advantage, I don't think you need the selection. Like, maybe I'm wrong, and if my opponent hits a land drop, they cast a Fury or something, and it is just like a huge game-breaking deal, but I was terrified of Forge into Trap. Like, a Reanimate can cost me 5 life. It's a really big deal right now. My opponent topped both cards. That does not bode well for me. I might just get run over. Okay, this is fine. Okay. This is all fine for me. Like, my opponent's going to take an extra card, and then I'm going to Solitude their Seasoned Dungeoneer while gaining some life. Well, kind of gaining some life. This also, like, sets me up for an Orcish Bowmaster's blowout that my opponent didn't play around. Oh my god. That is such a bad play. Holy shit. Okay. Reanimate target Solitude. Clear Seasoned Dungeoneer. Now, like, you still have the initiative in Monarch, but I am in an incredible position relative to what I could have been in. Okay, so my opponent did not opt to make a blocker to hold their stuff. Again, I don't think I get to Wasteland them. Let's see what they got. That's a Fury. That's good. I think my opponent has made some tactical errors, but I think their deck bails them out. I think I just usually, literally, or effectively lose the game to the Throne of the Dead 3. This is a good indicator of how powerful this deck is. Like, my opponent just got to draw 1 card every turn for the rest of the game, and it made up for a lot of mistakes. My opponent picks up a Plains. I'm going to need a removal spell for this Seasoned Dungeoneer. I think I'm going to take 6, go to 1, and then try to figure out some way to win from here. It's just so hard because, like, Trap is looming. I should already just be dead. Sure. Yeah, you can take your card. I'll end of turn flash this in to use my mana, with the hope being that I remove this, take the initiative, and do something somehow. This kills me. That is disappointing. GG. I feel like I've had so many middling hands tonight. I'm not getting, like, the crazy Dark Ritual fueled stuff. I don't think I'm going to pitch this. Like, I have a reasonable mix of lands and spells, and Bowmasters into Bowmasters backed by 2 removal spells is a plan. My opponent has taken 1 mulligan. Is it a mirror? Could be a mirror. Could be a storm deck. Could be a pseudo mirror with Beseech. We have gotten the oh boy in chat. Makes me think it's a mirror or pseudo mirror. Reanimate, damn it. Reanimate and getting the Exsanguinator Cavalry for 1 mana would have been cool. That's so good against me right now. Yeah. That's also so good against me. So my opponent just has the ability to kind of go wide of what I'm doing. And this Retrofitter Foundry means that these Urza Saga tokens aren't X1s anymore. Which is really awkward. Fuck your Urza Saga. That was such a good draw. That was literally the best draw in my whole deck right there. That was very lucky. 4 in 52 chance. That's a nice looking swamp. I like that color. Douthie Voidwalker resolves. So I potentially want to use an Edict on that ASAP. Sheoldred's Edict is better than usual against the tokens. Let's just take this out, though. Please sacrifice a non-token creature. We're probably going to see a lot of the, like, deck building decisions that I was talking about in the intro come up during this video. Alright. Unsurprisingly, I lost to Bowmaster. My opponent's choked on mana. I'm also choked on mana. Opposition agent is kind of unimpressive. I am going to cast a Thoughtseize. It knocks me off curve and it is an inefficient use of my mana, but my opponent might have some powerful 3. Okay. That's a choice. I'm going to take Liliana of the Veil. Why are we running Funeral Charm? Like, I guess it kills a Bowmaster. But, like, why is that worth a slot? -2, -1, right? Yeah. Like, I'll just happily drop a Douthie Voidwalker into play. Pass the turn. I can blow Snuff out on this token if I want. I'm not sure that I really care about it, though. Like, I don't think I want to let a Retrofitter Foundry activation deal 4 points of damage to me. I wonder if my opponent is further down the Pox line than I am. That would explain Funeral Charm. I mean, maybe not explain. That might be a bit generous. Send it. And then my opponent will presumably just keep making tokens with Retrofitter's Foundry. Yeah. Am I just pinging one? If I do it now, it can't be converted. Let's say yes, and if my opponent wastes some mana on a Funeral Charm, I'm, like, actively good with it. Like, especially when they're stuck on mana. Like, Funeral Charm is worth half a card here. And if they Funeral Charm the Bowmasters, I grow this out of range of an X1. So a future Funeral Charm or equivalent doesn't kill my stuff. I just block. Yeah, I think I'll block and, like, oddly tax my opponent's mana. Like, they can Funeral Charm this if they want to keep their thing alive. Otherwise, if they Funeral Charm this, they're not activating this. That means I get 3 points of damage when I'm already the aggressor. Wasteland is fine. Okay, so my opponent has both these things up. Oh, that's really good. I'm not going to attack with this, though. We're going to hope to, like, dodge some random sweeper, like Toxic Deluge, Damnation, Bantu's Last Reckoning. That's the sort of thing that would get my opponent out of this double Douthie Voidwalker situation. Otherwise, this is just really good. Notably, shadow creatures can block shadow creatures, so if my opponent ends up finding a Douthie Voidwalker of their own, like, that's a thing. You may kill my orc. You have my blessing. Fine with that happening. I conceptually have my opponent on a 2-turn clock. That's maybe not a genuine thought process. But that's kind of where we're at. It is a smallpox. I'll junk my Snuff out. That's not great here. I will lose a Voidwalker. I will lose a Swamp. And my opponent junks their Wasteland, which is expected. It's very bad for my opponent if I draw a mana source. And I did. So drawing a mana source, opponent discarded Chains. Drawing a mana source just means that I get to do this and put another body into play so that my opponent can't just, like, Smallpox or Edict away this Douthie Voidwalker that is very quickly killing them. So now it's like weirdos like Ensnaring Bridge that are kind of scary. But I don't know that my opponent is playing that in game 1. Sorcery Speed token. That's fine. 3, 4, 5. Please sacrifice a creature token. 5 damage. Nice. So, Snuff out always goes. From there, things are a little weird. I'm not built for this pseudo mirror. I can play Turok that scales. It's just like weird versus Funeral Charm deck. I think I'm playing it anyway. My own lilies are weird and probably not good for me. Urza's Saga is the hardest thing in the entire deck for me to beat. Wastelanding one of those and then extracting it makes the matchup much easier. 2 Snuff Outs becomes 2 Turoks. I really want to be able to just like top deck gas. I don't have extra gas to board in because like Lily isn't really gas. It's probably what I'm doing because my opponent is on like Douthie Voidwalkers and such. I like get rid of these. That lets me play a surgical. Maybe I just play 2 lilies. That's fine. Sheoldred's Edicts aren't exactly sexy, but I am sometimes going to have to just get an Urza Saga out of the way. Or Urza Saga token out of the way. Let's try this. My opener has 2.5 lands. This is unexciting, but fine. I feel like I am just like not hitting the upper echelon of hands here. I'll like discard Surgical and Lily in some order. I probably discard my Lily first. Alright, there's still Funeral Charms in. But kind of my issue is that like Lily doesn't really win games. And my opponent is going to hemorrhage a lot of their own resources by plussing that Lily. That's the worst timeline for me. I don't have the Wasteland to get rid of that, and I have to play things to get rid of this Lily. Ugh. I'm going to get rid of a basic Swamp. And hope my opponent doesn't Dark Ritual Opposition Agent at end step. But I do not want to sorcery speed do this in case my opponent... there's Ensnaring Bridges. In case my opponent is playing their own Reanimate. Swamp Cycle. Yeah. I don't have Pithing Needle in the board. Yeah. This is a Null Rod build. Okay. I don't have a lot of agency here. Like, I play this, it eats an Edict. I play this, it hits an Edict. I play Grief, and hopefully that kills Lily. Sure. Get rid of that. I don't think you are supposed to play Liliana's Triumph in Legacy anymore. Like, it's a combo with Liliana. Like, obviously, you know, it's in the name, but Sheoldred's Edict is so good, and Sudden Edict is so good. I don't think the upside of this is enough. At this point, I'll discard the Surgical. I hate showing that to my opponent, but I think if I have any chance at staying in the game, I need to keep the threat. Well, that's really good. My opponent does this. I do this. I'm going to ping the 1/1 over pinging the Lily. If my opponent wants to ultimate right now, by all means. They get another token, and then presumably a Retrofitter Foundry. The rack. That does not appear to be better to me than Retrofitter Foundry. Okay, I'll get rid of an Orc. A Bowmaster? The Orc could potentially grow and get to attack. I'll get rid of the Bowmaster. My opponent's not drawing extra cards. Yeah, I'll take some damage. Like, this is whatever. Nice. So like this is the problem with trying to win the game via Lily. I have passed this window where Lily is good. And now like this game is fully, do I top deck better than my opponent? And as long as the answer is yes, this card, while not fully irrelevant, is just not good. My opponent has discarded what is, in my mind, the best card in the entire goddamn matchup. Like, I'm a mono black deck, I just don't have outs to that. Okay, they plussed. This has Menace and Lifelink. I get to just start attacking the Lily, and this rack doesn't outdo this stuff. Send it at Lily. And then, as soon as I get rid of this Lily, the dam is just going to break on Exsanguinator Cavalry growing outside of range of my opponent's constructs and other creatures. Raven's Crime. I'll respond. Yep. So now my opponent can Lily plus to try to keep their Lily alive for another turn. Yep. But, like, imagine that I draw a removal spell here. Like, I remove that construct token, I kill Liliana, I start scaling up Exsanguinator Cavalry. The rack is irrelevant. Yeah, this is exactly it. So I do this. Make my opponent sacrifice this. Yeah, my opponent has given me the GG. Like, they know. So this kills Lily. I start scaling up Exsanguinator Cavalry. I have my own Liliana so that I can, like, minus and get rid of an ensnaring bridge if I need to. This one is this one's over. Yeah, like, I'll happily take some more rack damage. That's fine. There's some weird Liliana the Veil of Blood token stuff going on here. I'm just going to plus. I don't care about this Dark Ritual. Okay, my opponent had an Urborg. I'll go ahead and send on in. I keep scaling up my knight. This is discard a card, sacrifice it. So this is fine. Yeah, again, the rack damage is completely irrelevant. I'm just going to go ahead and play my swamp, and plus, I just want to know anything weird that's going to happen prior to combat. And we've got this one pretty well locked up. And we get there. What's my record now? 2-2. All right, I'm very good at just drawing medium hands tonight, apparently. I don't think it's worth mulliganing. God damn it. This is so much value. Oh, I hate this. I take Lightning Bolt. Ugh. So my kind of issue here is that if I don't take Lightning Bolt, Dark Ritual into Grief just is awkward. It's still awkward because my opponent can Brainstorm and hide their best stuff, and, like, Snapcaster Mage just exists. I think it is what it is. I'm just going to curve Grief into Exsanguinator Cavalry and hope that it does stuff. My opponent doesn't even necessarily need to Brainstorm. Fuck. I'm gonna start taking Snapcaster Mages. Oh, God. So Grixis Control is, like, not something that someone should reasonably expect to be playing against in Legacy. Like, it makes no sense to play Grixis Control in a world where the, like, Up the Beanstalk decks exist that just get to accumulate so much more value so much more easily. All right. Opponent does not flash in Bowmasters. I'll drop Exsanguinator Cavalry. At least my opponent's mana is a little awkward right now. Like, they can't Brainstorm and then fetch as of right now. But I don't know that I'm putting up enough pressure for their deck for this to matter. Okay, it's a basic. They are not setting them... I just X'd through a card. They are not setting themselves up for just immediate Snapcaster Lightning Bolt. Yeah, okay, it's a Snapcaster Mage. That's the remaining card that I know about. Okay, so they can get a basic mountain and then be on Snapcaster Bolt for next turn without exposing themselves to Wasteland. Seems good. Molten Collapse. Yeah. I needed a faster hand than this. And my opponent's going to hold back for Grief purposes. Don't Force of Will blue card me. So to sell this a little bit, I'm going to, like, sit here and think about whether or not I'm attacking in before doing it. To, like, sell it that I don't have the removal spell. Now, please sacrifice a non-token creature, so I get to keep my Grief alive. I take out this token for free. My opponent is still just going to, like, Snapcaster Bolt this Grief, and I'm a sad panda. But at least I force them to use the Snapcaster Bolt or equivalent on this Grief. Sure. Snapcaster, Bolt. That probably trades for my Grief and Snuff out. I don't know, I can try to wait till I draw Bowmasters and take some undeterminate amount of damage. Ooh. Send it. Bolt me. Fuck. Yeah. Alright. I play Exsanguinator Cavalry, which will eat Snapcaster Bolt or equivalent at some point. Sure. Oh, like, for these matchups, I just don't have the ability to board into more gas other than the Turok. Which is, like, not great in a Bowmasters matchup. Yeah. I am probably going to just snuff out this Snapcaster Mage. I'm going to wait to see what I draw, and I might wait a turn or two. Like, I can draw Bowmasters, and it's just so much better for me. I'm just not sure how much damage I can take from this. Grixis Control is notoriously bad at actually closing out the game. I think if I draw a land, I will just snuff this out for full mana cost and not lower my life total. It lets my opponent, like, loop it back with another Culligan's Command, which is, like, not the greatest, but from game one, I am going to be keeping timeout as a win condition in mind. Like, that is how bad Grixis Control tends to be at closing out games. My opponent has some number of trolls, so that's a little better than normal. But we are expecting to take, like, Baleful Strix, Bowmaster, Snapcaster Mage sized chunks, rather than, you know, Uro and Murktide sized chunks of a more meta control deck. Alright, there is a Reanimate. That play is almost certainly wrong, right? Like, this exists. My opponent can put me on a 3-turn clock rather than an... well, it ends up being differing number of turns. I'm going to hold this land. Sure. Like, Exsanguinator Cavalry is like good and all, but my opponent could just have me dead so quickly, backed by their other disruption. Oh, they found a K command. That's disgusting. I wiggle my way out of this. I don't think I can wiggle my way out of this. I'm going to concede and save myself time. Yeah, I just don't... I don't get to board in more gas very well. My snuff outs are terrible. Those become Turoks. I don't want to really attack my opponent's hand. Like, that's not how I want to play this matchup. I want to just board in a bunch more threats. I can't really do that. I'm not super excited to be playing Liliana of the Veil and discarding my own threats. I'd like Surgical Extraction for Snapcaster Mages. That doesn't feel great. Yeah, that doesn't feel great. I'm going to keep the Thought Seizes for synergy with Turok. But I'm really unhappy of how conceptually this matchup profile looks. This is a Magic the Gathering card. I don't think this is explosive enough. I'm not going to mulligan it, but I am not getting these, like, ideal Dark Ritual, Grief Reanimate openers. Like, maybe I should be mulliganing more aggressively, but I am keeping reasonable mixes of lands and spells. How does this work? When it dies, return it to the battlefield tapped. So the Surgical Extraction randomly shuts off the Malakir Rebirth. So does the Cling to Dust, for that matter. I'll take one of the removal spells. I think I'm going to take Culligan's Command. But I am just generally unhappy to be playing this matchup. Sure, that's fine. For Malakir Rebirth just becoming a tapped land? That might be the case. Just with, like, Cling and Surgical here. I think this is a spell. I'm just unhappy about it. Sure. Not fetching is awkward for opposition agent reasons. Yes. Yes, I would like to get you. Thank you for asking. Opponent said, yeah, that's on me. Okay, cool. So I will take a little snip here for my future purposes. Sorin the Mirthless. Got it. Okay, there's Murktides in there. Is this the initiative card? Yeah. We've got some spice in there. My opponent's not on Wastelands, so I will just take something with black mana and another color. I'll grab like an Underground Sea. Alright, so my opponent just clings a card out of graveyard. That's fine. I imagine that at sorcery speed, I just lose this to Sudden Edict. Or, sorry, Sheoldred's Edict. And then I will just redeploy another one immediately. Yeah. So, yeah. Just sorcery speed it. Don't give my opponent that chance to fetch. Don't give them a chance to randomly decide that they would like to surgical extraction my opposition agents. Sure. That was a very fast shuffle. My opponent has Bowmasters available. So I'm not attacking with opposition agent. Let's just be mana efficient here. I'll play this Grief and see what my opponent wants to do about it. Okay, so now they surgical extraction this opposition agent, which doesn't do a lot. And then I take some other card from their hand. So this is a very good value Grief for me. Unless they're down to, 3 lands left or whatever. Alright, I get pinged. Grief reveals 3 lands. Not interested in this attack. The Grief attack's probably fine a little bit later. But this is the last opposition agent I ever get, and I know that 2 of my opponent's lands are currently just fully shut off. Does my opponent have a Mystic Sanctuary? They do not have a Mystic Sanctuary. Nice. Hardcast Force of Will isn't a thing. Opponent played this. I think I'm just going to go ahead and bash in. And then kind of use Sheoldred's Edict to stop a double block of some kind. Please sacrifice a non-token creature for me. Nice. So we take out this Orc Army token for free. I'll then drop Exsanguinator Cavalry into play. I know that I don't have any sweepers to worry about. What is this? Oh, it's Cling to Dust. Sure, then no, that's fine. Okay, opponent quickly passing the turn. Nice. So each one of these knights triggers, or each one of these Exsanguinator Cavalries triggers on each knight. So this stacks up very well. I don't care if my opponent like Bowmaster ambushes me at this point. Like, these knights will do plenty. Yeah, that's fine. Yep. Yeah, so I get 2 triggers from these, scaling up this creature immensely. And once this Bowmaster is out of play, I'll turn this swamp into something else. I'm not in a hurry, though. That's another land from the ones that I saw. Okay, opponent throws in the towel. Fully think my opponent punted that one by fetching into opposition agent. That game's hard for me to win. So my opponent has 1 Reanimate, 2 Snapcaster Mages, and a Cling to Dust as things in their graveyard. And I guess the From the Catacombs, is graveyard tangential as well. 2 Murktide Regents. That could be a pain. I can play Lily to help out with those. I'm just not excited about Lily in the matchup though. Again, I don't want to be discarding my own cards. Opponent does not have many counter spells in. They have 2 Force of Wills, 2 Thought Seizes to attack my own hand. Maybe I'm underestimating these. Maybe I play them over some number of Thought Seizes. It's just so hard for me to punch through my opponent's card advantage. Yeah, this is fine. This is a very good... Damn it. It's still a good hand, but the Grief Reanimate on turn 1 bullshit was something that I was really looking forward to. I will potentially just wasteland this Badlands with my first turn now. That makes that a little weirder. I still think I'm gonna do this. I'm currently not interested in griefing. I would like to hopefully play Turok and then Grief afterwards and grow Turok outside of Bowmaster's range. We'll see how that goes. We can play some Fair Magic for a while. I don't think I am in a rush. Like, I would like to get on board and established in some capacity, but I don't think this is do something now or I'm dead. Ooh. Now we're doing stuff. I think I'm pitching the Sheoldred's Edict here to do this Grief. And I have the intention of reanimating at this turn. I can pivot if I have to. And here I don't really care what I'm taking. I just care that I'm taking cards. From the Catacombs. I think I just try to leave that stranded in my opponent's hand and deal with it later. I think I'm just going to go ahead and take a Culligan's Command. Let this go. Reanimate my Grief. Take the other Culligan's Command. And leave my opponent in an awkward spot. And then I try to use some combination of these 3 cards to deal with this. Nice. I think I attack first. And then we make some decisions about what to do. It's always this. A little harder from there. I think I kick the Turok. It's just a little awkward because, like, with this trigger on the stack, my opponent could use a removal spell. But then I take out, like, a land and from the Catacombs still. And then hopefully I just aggro my opponent out before this is a real problem. We'll see. All right, so my opponent fetches around opposition agent. And here's to hoping I have 6 power in play at the end of this turn. Negative. My opponent pings. I think I have to Edict so I don't lose my Grief. Please sacrifice a non-token creature. I just don't want my opponent to block. Because the goal is, like, 3 damage, 6 damage, dead. Yeah, that's fine. I'm at 15. Let's attempt to Grief. See what my opponent has to say. Petty Theft. Sure. So, I fetch. Now, which one of these do I do? Opponent doesn't have blue to play this. I think I'm just gonna put a clock back into play, though. And, like, I can maybe resolve a Lily. I don't care a lot about the Lily right now. Nice. So send it. Sure. That happens. Sorcery speed this. No opportunity to fetch lands. Sounds good. I think I like that better than trying to get my opponent on a fetch. Alright, it's a bolt. So it's moot. Cool. Despite the fact that this doesn't take a card right now, I think this is all about putting the threat into play. We'll, you know, use Lily as a bad edict at some point later. I need to end this game before From the Catacombs gets into the equation. I don't think that's a particularly playable legacy card, but I'm sure not well equipped to beat it right now. It is a Reanimate on Bowmasters. Sure. If I do this, like, I play my cards, I will Edict you so that I can continue to attack in with this Grief. I guess Nimble Obstructionist is technically a Stifle, so let's fetch now. Attack for 3. The idea being that this Orc Army token has to now attack the Liliana, meaning that it's not held back for the Grief. Yet another Bowmasters would be probably the scariest draw. Okay, so opponent doesn't have a land, so opponent presumably has some removal spell for Grief here. Okay, yeah, it is an Edict. This Thoughtseize has no text right now. This is bad. This is the first turn of Breathing Room my opponent has had in a very long time. And every turn of Breathing Room is 2 points of damage, plus getting closer to Brazen Borrower and From the Catacombs. I will Thoughtseize It's really awkward if my opponent's last card is Call Against Command, and like I thought sees they Call Against Command me, discard my card, bring back a thing, but if it's just a regular removal spell, I need to take it right now. Cling to Dust instead. Not sure what else my opponent would be randomly floating a black mana like this for. It is indeed Cling to Dust. It's weird because, like, if this isn't a land, I just end up taking whatever it is. Sure. So that Thoughtseize is kind of a net negative for me. But my opponent's Hellbent. We're a little ways away from the Catacombs. But if my opponent just top decks a couple removal spells in a row, like, it's bad for me. Let's hope my opponent has a brick here. All right, my opponent takes it. I gain some life, and I am probably safe to loot. I'll discard this to get some new card. Oh, Cling to Dust is 4 mana. What do I even take? Bowmasters helps me go wide of Edicts. Grief is better against the Orc Army token that's already on board. Opposition Agent helps against land drops, but is bad at closing the game. I think I'm just going to take... I could take... Grief puts me to 2. I guess the life total matters. If the life total matters, let's Bowmasters. Bowmasters doesn't leave me dead to Bolt. Surgical Extraction. Okay, yeah. Like I was sitting there thinking, like, what could my opponent have that they would not have played? And like the Force of Will type cards were the sorts of things that came to mind. All right. This is tight. All right, I get hit for 2. I'm at 4. I, in theory, get to attack for 3 back. Dark Ritual's a dead draw. Hopefully my opponent has a dead draw of their own. They're at 1. Force of Will is off. A Bowmasters is lethal. I get to loot away this Dark Ritual into a real card. Oh my god, am I going to use a Take Numa? I am. Is this A or target? A. So I'll wait on this and surprise my opponent with it. We have gotten the GGs from my opponent. You may absolutely Thoughtseize me and send yourself out on your own terms. I absolutely respect it. And we struggle for it, but we put up a positive finish in this league. So we put up the 3-2. We put up a positive finish with this league. How do I evaluate this one? I feel like my draws tonight were below average. Maybe part of that is the fact that I don't have 4 trolls. Like with 4 trolls, I troll Reanimate much more frequently than I did this league. I'm not sure that I ever did that in the entire league. I didn't line up Grief Reanimate too many times. I didn't line up Dark Ritual 3-drop too many times. I feel like I kept a lot of mid-range Bowmaster Voidwalker hands that sometimes worked out and sometimes didn't work out. That said, I don't feel like I played against like great decks or great players on average today. Like I feel like my draws were below average. I also feel like my opponents were below average, so I feel like those two things kind of balance out, which I think leaves me tipping the scales towards thumbs down on this one. I'm not sure that I can articulate quite why this doesn't quite feel right to me. Something's off. Like, it may be that if you're playing Exsanguinator Cavalry, you want 4. It may be that if you're playing Troll, you want 4. Something about the numbers just don't quite jive. Let me know in the comments if you can articulate it better than that, but a lot of times I feel like these scam decks of various natures have really powerful opening hands, and I felt like I was on mid-power opening hands just so much of the time here. I think that's my complaint. My secondary complaint is something that I talked about where I don't feel like I'm able to board up threats for control matchups, and like I'm very mid on Liliana in Legacy. Like, it's technically playable versus control decks. It's, you know, a flexible card. But I really felt like I wanted more oomph out of the sideboard in a bunch of the rounds today, and I just didn't have it. So, folks, I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. If you need to get any Magic cards, maybe pre-orders, check out Cool Stuff Inc. and use promo code ThrabenU to save 5% on your next order. I am ready for bed. I've played 10 rounds of Mono Black tonight, so have a great rest of the day. See ya!